Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Jeff sent me a note about a rather short story out of Texas, but the headline will get your attention. Man sentenced to 40 years in prison following his 10th DWI conviction. His 10th conviction for DWI. From KBTX.com, Catherine Griffith wrote this from Bryan, Texas. A Brazos County jury sentenced a man to 40 years in prison after he was convicted of driving while intoxicated 10 times. And of course, Brazos, I looked it up. It's spelled Brazos. And I thought, well, I would normally say Brazos, and I'd probably get it wrong. I should look this up. And I found a video of a guy who just simply says, it's Brazos, not Brazos. It's like the guy was thinking about me and my problems. So Brazos County jury. Same jury found the man guilty after 2 hours of deliberation. And so there's an interesting twist here, because the jury both found him guilty, and it says that they also sentenced him. He was arrested back in 2016, which makes you wonder about how fast the courts are, after a citizen reported he was driving while intoxicated. The caller said they saw the man at Walmart, and he smelled like alcohol when in the store, was having trouble walking, and was talking to himself. Now, if you could go get arrested and sent to prison for talking to yourself, I'd been locked up a long time ago, but hey, I enjoy the conversation. When officers did a blood test, they showed his blood alcohol concentration was 0.16, which is about twice the legal limit. Our community thrives because citizens look out for each other, says the Brazos County District Attorney. If an attentive person hadn't called the police, the damage could have been much worse. We are thankful this man will hopefully never drive on our streets again. Meanwhile, he has served 3 separate prison sentences apparently before this. 2 for DWI and 1 for possession of a controlled substance. And so the weird part about this is we hear less and less about these kinds of cases. And I know people say, but Steve, you've done this before, similar stories. Yeah, but they used to be much more common. I'm talking about in the 60s and earlier. It was not uncommon to hear somebody had their 20th, their 30th arrest for drunk driving. And it's simply because most states had laws that said if you get arrested for drunk driving, here's what happens to you. And they didn't escalate on second or third offenses, at least not the way they do now. So I remember when they reformed the laws, and that's what they did. They changed how it escalates each time you get a subsequent drunk driving arrest. And then also they started lowering the threshold for what was considered DUI or DWI. And so those two things have combined to eliminate a lot of this kind of stuff. And so in Michigan, I can tell you, and in many states, first offense, drunk driving, bad things can happen to you. Your driver's license can get taken away, fines, costs. You might get a restricted license. You can drive to and from work, but you're going to be hurting for a little while. Second offense, you will lose your license for a period of time, and you will probably go to jail for a period of time. Might just be weekends for a month. It might be 30 days spread out over a couple months. It might be, third offense uses the word prison. Prison. And it's not uncommon that someone will get locked up for 1 year. Locked up for a year on a third offense, drunk driving. And so most people learn on their first. If they don't learn on their first and they make a really, really bad error of judgment on their second, they will learn from that. And I'd like to see the statistics, but I suspect that the number of people who get their first, who get their second, who get their third, and it's got to be like that. It's got to be like that. And so when I used to handle drunk driving cases, which I don't do anymore, but I used to, I would tell people, I'll handle a first. I will handle a first because a couple of reasons, one of which is that people aren't going to go to prison, right? But number two, I am convinced that nowadays, a lot of people are at the threshold of being drunk and don't realize it because they've lowered that threshold so far. And so I'm not saying that a person's 0.08 can necessarily drive well. I'm saying I don't know that they understand that they're actually at that limit. So I know a lot of what they've been trying to do lately is educate people on how few drinks it takes to get you to 0.08 and what else factors into it, such as how much you weigh, how big the drinks are, and what else you've eaten recently, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's some things to think about. But in the old days, I remember hearing stories about people, oh yeah, this guy's 40th conviction, his 45th conviction. And all that would happen is they take away his license for a little while, fine him, and give it back to him. And I have known a lot of attorneys in my career. I've been practicing law for 32 years. But when I started, I was hanging out with guys because I was in an office with other attorneys, older than me and wiser than me, who'd been around and had seen everything. And so I'd be talking to them about handling drunk driving cases today. And they'd say, oh, you don't understand what it was like in the old days. And they'd tell me these stories. And you would hear a story about somebody whose 10th DWI, oh, that's amateur work. That's nothing. That's the other guy with 20 or 30 or 40. And sadly, you would then hear the stories about somebody who got killed by a drunk driver who had 24 previous convictions. And that's when people started looking at this going, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to stop that from happening. So that's one of the reasons they've escalated this the way they have. So this guy is going to jail for quite some time, 40 years in prison. Now, I did notice, and I'm sure you caught it too, that it says here the Brazos County jury sentenced the man to 40 years. And they'd also found him guilty. And so in most places that I'm familiar with, a jury can find you guilty and doesn't rule on the sentence other than like a death penalty case. Do they get the death penalty, yes or no? Michigan doesn't have the death penalty. So that particular question doesn't get asked here, unless it's in federal court, but that's another story altogether. However, apparently the jury had a say here in what kind of punishment this guy was going to get. And that's appropriate because they're the ones who sat and heard all the evidence. So that is interesting as well. But I can tell you that when I was doing drunk driving cases, one of the reasons I did a few of them was court appointments. So I'm sure you know that if you have been arrested and can't afford an attorney, you can ask for one to be appointed for you. And so I'd be appointed to somebody who got arrested for drunk driving so they couldn't afford an attorney. And that's the first few I handled were because of that. The court called me up and said, Steve, we're appointing you in this case. It's a drunk driving case. There you go. And so I met a lot of people who were arrested for drunk driving. I've also spoken to people. I've also just been around and talked to prosecutors and so on. And a good number of drunk driving cases are initiated because somebody calls the police and says, I saw this person in a store, in a gas station, or just driving down the road, weaving around. And with cell phones, as ubiquitous as they are now, someone can grab a cell phone and call 911 and say, hey, there's a drunk driver right now on this road heading this way in this type of car. And a police officer in the area can swing around, follow the person, and observe for themselves what's going on. And so if they see the person doing this in their lane and crossing the center lane and crossing the fog line or doing other behavior that's obviously not appropriate, then they can pull them over. And I've read police reports that actually said, was on patrol on this date and time at this, location, and a call came over the radio about a car being driven erratically by a suspected drunk driver. I went to the location, saw the car, followed it, and it did the following things: ran a stop sign, ran off the road, ran over a mailbox, whatever it is. Wrong place, wrong time for the mailbox, right? So then initiated a traffic stop, walked up to the car, rolled the window down, and of course the person is just stinking drunk. And I've heard some of those people complain when they read the police report and they go, wait, I got pulled over because someone reported me. What kind of person reports someone else? Someone who doesn't want to be on the road with a drunk driver. That's who. And quite a few of these get turned in that way. And you don't have to turn somebody in just because you saw them drinking and driving. But if you're on the road with them and you realize, oh, if they're coming towards me and across the center line, they'd be killing me. That might make you think about it a little differently. It might, but there you go. So this guy's getting 40 years in prison on his 10th. So someplace off in the 2060s, if he serves all his time, he'll be getting out. But we'll see about that. So man sentenced to 40 years in prison following 10th DWI conviction. Catherine Griffith wrote it for KBTX.com. And Jeff sent it to me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. One who lives sees much. One who travels sees more.